It's been months and months, and that noise is still keeping me up at night. You're not doing anything about it. If you don't fix it, I'm going to the newspapers. Do you have a neighbor like that? Are you suffering from unidentified noise pollution? Do you feel like you're the only one that can hear it? Let's see if we can work through this problem today. Today, I'm with Patricia Elia of Elia Associates. Now, you're a partner there. No surprise that the name is the same. And Patricia, you're so well known across the country and a longtime CCI director and supporter. I'm really honored that you're with us here today. So let's jump right into it. Mm-hmm. Why is noise such a difficult issue?
Well, thanks for having me, Murray. It's good to see you. And, well, why is it difficult? Because perhaps our expectations are not reasonable. Noise is to be expected in condominium living, but it's not reasonable for us to expect absolute silence. If it was a vacant land condo, different discussion. But we're talking about multi-stories, for example, where there are shared spaces. Further, each person's reaction to noise is very different, and tolerances are different. Therefore, it's important to know yourself when you're buying a condo, what your expectations are about the little things like noise. As well, I think it's important to consider what are the potential areas in the condo where noise may be generated that you may find disturbing, and even to think about whether they can actually be corrected. Noise will be present. If we live in urban centers, we know that. However, we can also work to identify noise, acknowledge that there is an issue, and ensure that there is a legal issue to be addressed, and then try to solve the problem, okay? So even if there's no breach of duty, the corporation should work in good faith to try and resolve these problems. Why? Because we want peaceful communities, but at the same time, set reasonable expectation. Sometimes noise is also based on design. And I think that's important to think about. Noise travels in odd ways through condominiums. You know this as well as I do. We've had cases where people are hearing noises that are actually not generated in the adjacent condo, but are on the other wing in the L-shaped condo on a different floor. And it took us a while to track it down, but it was interesting because relationships and conflict starts to arise when people are agitated. But as well, there are things that can't be fixed, like perhaps the elevators where they're located, the garage door opening. We can't fix that necessarily. Garbage chutes. There's also the piano prodigy that lives next door, the owner with the 2 dogs, and the Maple Leaf fan who gets so excited and always hopes that the Leafs will win. So we have to also realize people get carried away. But there are also the people in the gym who are lifting weights and happen to drop their weights consistently as they're getting jacked. So to me, that's why noise is a problem. We're not living alone.
Somebody once told me when you live in a high-rise condominium, you're always 6 inches away from your neighbor.
It's very true.
So we know that some noises are inherent in the building.
Yeah.
And you touched on it for being close to the elevators, being close to the garbage chute.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be noise.
Yeah.
In those situations, what can a resident do and what recourse do they have?
Okay. Well, we can't ban people from using elevators, and not taking out the garbage would not be a good idea. So we have to figure out what are the solutions here. We can actually try to source the causes of noise and figure out if they can be isolated. For example, I had referenced, where you buy. Where you buy is also important, but after you've bought, then the boards have a duty to enforce compliance with the Act, Declaration, Bylaws, and Rules, and there's this little thing called the right to quiet enjoyment. Now, many people think that means, I have a right for it to be quiet. That's not exactly what it means in real estate law, but it includes the ability to enjoy your property. And people, when they're agitated by noise, are not enjoying their property. So when you have a complaint, what you have to do as a board, and I'm a condo director, so I've taken this on myself with my board, is you have to be proactive. Now now you must investigate. You must try to isolate the sources, right? And you should work in good faith. And you should not, as well, take sides, is my experience. There's some really good case law around, penalizing boards that did take sides when they shouldn't have. And what you've got to also try to do is be a little bit empathetic for the person suffering from the alleged noise, okay? Because what happens is people become more stressed out. They're more on edge. The claims, if you look at the case laws, I haven't been able to sleep. Well, how are you if you haven't slept, right? So it's incumbent on the board under Section 119 to start that tracking and investigation. Now, it may not be an issue between unit owner and unit owner. It could be between the common elements and a unit owner. Right. And then we've got to figure out what's our duty, right? As the board, do we have to put in an isolator? Is something fallen off its isolation for noise? Is there sound attenuation work that we have to do? We have to know that. But at the same time, we don't have to rebuild the building.
Right, right. So if I'm hearing you right, and I hear this in my job all the time, you said it really nicely when you said it's in the other wing and it's up a few floors. That's concrete and rebar, and once something hits that rebar, it just travels through the whole building.
You got it.
But it can be, on occasion, expensive to source out where the sound is coming from.
Yeah.
Does the corporation, the strata or the condominium corporation, have an obligation to do whatever it takes at whatever the cost is to address the noise?
Oh, what a dangerous question, Marie. But it's a good question. And I think that the board has to take reasonable steps to show that it has executed its duty under the act. Because here's the thing, like I said, we can't rebuild a building, right? So you hire an acoustical engineer. Why? Because the corporation will then have a third-party professional providing information that is based on science and measurement. So they'll measure decibel levels, they'll talk about frequency, they'll talk about duration, okay? And that will give the board some feedback because they're relying on professionals. Section 37 of the Act tells us we have to do our due diligence.
Right.
Okay, but then we find out it's the way the building is constructed. Well, we're not rebuilding the building. We will get the acoustical engineer, though, to opine that our building has been built to the building code at the time that the building was constructed, okay? And then we'll try and see what we can do. But we can't always solve every problem. Now, if it's unit owner to unit owner and kids are racing in the unit, we can maybe do something like putting down carpets, of. If there's a piano prodigy next door, sometimes we've raised the piano and put them on special types of sound absorbing attenuation material so that there is no echo. And we also had a prodigy case where what we did is we put the prodigy on a regular schedule of practice. Because what we found was it wasn't just the decibel level, and it was Rachmaninoff. So anybody knowing Rachmaninoff, very intense, but it was over 35 decibels. And then it was unpredictable when it would happen. And the duration was hours. And that's what agitated the other unit owners below, unpredictability, the decibel level. We also told the parents of the prodigy that maybe they should hire a studio and take the noise outside because the condo wasn't a studio, right?
Right. Use your environment appropriately.
Right, exactly. It's a residential condo.
Yeah. It was funny you talked about bringing in an acoustical engineer. And so does this scenario make sense to you? Maybe you can elaborate on it a bit. Neighbor upstairs, neighbor downstairs. Neighbor downstairs is complaining about the noise upstairs. We bring in an acoustical engineer. We try to reproduce whatever was happening when they hear the noise upstairs.
Yep.
And the engineer comes back and says that falls completely within acceptable standards.
Right.
And so now, moving forward, you give the complaining suite a copy of the report. But future complaints, do you still investigate those, or is that report satisfied enough that future complaints are not going to be followed up on?
Are they the same units?
Yeah, same too.
Yeah, well, I think, the limit and scope of there'll be a limited scope to the investigation, right? Because I think, what we always have to be cognizant of is if we've done our due diligence and it's the same repetitive issue, well, if we can't change it and we've already determined that, then there'll be no other response for the board to give. And when I look at it, I think, what would a judge say? What would the CAT say? They would say, did you take reasonable steps? Did you investigate? Did you try to rectify? And then there are limits to what you can do,
Right.
right? Because the other thing is, remember I spoke about expectations and tolerances. People are different. Some people, the condo life is not always for them. I've been on a board where I've had to walk through a suite as a director because it's in the director's discretion. We replicated the noise and I could hear nothing, and my hearing's pretty good. And this person was just extremely sensitive to the slightest bit of noise.
Right.
So it's managing that too.
Yeah, if you're listening to it all the time, then you're looking for it all the time.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah. So let me see if I have this right. So the loud party next door might be acceptable once, but continued parties going on every Friday and Saturday, there's action that can be taken. I get that. That's pretty clear, but where to start? I mean, do you start with investigating the noise, or do you just jump in and say you're having parties, or it's like your piano, you're playing the piano? I think some of the directors that will be watching this might want to say, I don't even know how to tackle this problem.
Fair enough. Well, I think here's what I think. It's evidence, evidence, evidence. So what does your paper trail look like? You get notification of the complaint. Depending on the type of complaint, it could be a party. You're going to definitely write a letter from management to show that you're actually responding. But you may also, because if it's a repetitive party situation, let's say, the issue is not really the noise per se. It's the behavior that's causing the noise, which is in somebody's control. Okay? And that is something that you can't impose your lifestyle on other people. You may like to have a good party, but you're living in a condo. So I see management being able to take those 3 letters, writing them, and then escalating it if it's necessary. But it's more those trickier sounds that I think that's where the board, again, evidence, 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 is really critical in understanding how did you respond, how did you investigate, was your investigation credible? Because if you look at the CAT cases, you look at the court cases, we are not able anymore just to rely on a manager's affidavit. You'll see that standard increasing. So boards, you have to invest your time and your resources into good evidence. And that is when a judge or the CAT can read it and say, okay, third party has said that this is something that is a noise that can't be rectified. Or if it can be rectified, then it will be on the board to take steps to work through that. And you see this with smoking, you see it with noise, things that intrude upon our quiet enjoyment.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, thank you for this. I really appreciate it. Any last comments for that poor Swede owner who we now have determined is sensitized to the noise? Anything that we can advise them of?
Well, I think, what you want to think about is if you are suffering from a noise issue, please let your management team and board know. That starts the process. And, I know sometimes it feels like we're on opposite sides, but we're really not. Boards work for the corporation's interests, yes, but they also want people to enjoy their communities and their units. So get on the path of starting, document. There are now apps as well where you can take decibel level readings if you're concerned about the decibel levels. And you can do that off your smartphone. I was very interested when I was researching this that there's an app for that now. But actually document. You may have to journal. You may have to indicate the date, the time, the frequency, the duration, the nature of the noise to help isolate it. Because those are the things that we try to rectify when we have a problem like that at our table. We're trying to figure out what is the solution, but we can only find the solution if we know the cause.
Thanks for that. It really puts some clarity around this whole issue of noise. Patricia, as always, great. There you have it, folks. There's all kinds of noise, and some of it, unfortunately, is going to be acceptable. And if you heard what Patricia said, in some cases, you have to be part of the investigation as well by journaling when, where, how long, etc. So hopefully we've given you a few tips, cleared up a little bit. Maybe the noise has gone down a notch or two. And until next time, I'm Murray Johnson, and this has been your Condo Connection.